The story of Moses. Here is the story more than 3,000 years ago. The world was ruled by empires. Among them stood Egypt, the most powerful civilization on earth. Its cities were crowned with towering temples. Its deserts were marked by colossal pyramids. And upon its throne sat Pharaoh, a ruler believed to be a living god. This was a time when power decided truth, and strength ruled over justice. Yet beneath Egypt's greatness, lived a people without freedom. Once welcomed into Egypt during a time of famine, they had grown into a vast nation. And that frightened the king, so Pharaoh made a decision. That would change history forever. He would not destroy them outright. Their suffering echoed across the land. And still, their chains only grew heavier. Pharaoh watched their numbers increase despite the oppression. The harder they were pressed, the more they multiplied. At first, he ordered the Hebrew midwives to kill the baby boys at birth. But they feared God more than they feared Pharaoh, and the children lived. That angered the king, so he issued a darker decree, one that would stain the Nile itself. Every Hebrew baby boy was to be thrown into the river. The Nile, once the source of life, became a river of death. Fear filled the homes of the Israelites. Mothers held their newborns in trembling arms, listening for approaching footsteps. Fathers whispered prayers in the night, begging God to spare their sons. The sound of rushing water haunted every breath. Yet even in the depths of despair, God had not forgotten his people. Though Egypt's power seemed absolute, it was not eternal. Though Pharaoh believed himself divine, he was still only a man. The river meant for death would soon carry hope. And the story of deliverance was about to begin. In the darkest hour of oppression, a child was born. For 3 months, his mother hid him, defying the king's command. When she could hide him no longer, she placed him into God's hands. She laid him among the reeds, and let the river carry her prayer. And his sister watched from a distance to see what would happen. Then came Pharaoh's daughter, unaware she was about to change history. When she opened the basket, she saw the child, and her heart was moved. Smiling through tears, Pharaoh's daughter watches approvingly. And she named him Moses, because she drew him out of the water. A child born under a sentence of death was raised in the house of a king. And though he lived between two worlds, God was shaping a deliverer. The story of Moses had only just begun. The child drawn from the water grew up in the house of a king. He was taught the wisdom of Egypt, trained in words and deeds. But his heart was divided between who he was and where he came from. One day, Moses went out to his own people and saw their suffering. In anger, he struck down an Egyptian and buried him in the sand. But the secret did not stay buried. When Pharaoh heard of it, he sought to kill Moses. So Moses fled from Egypt and became a wanderer. In Midian, Moses became a shepherd, far from palaces and power. The prince of Egypt had become a keeper of sheep, but God was not finished with him. Moses fled into the wilderness, leaving behind the palace, his power, and his past. In Midian, Moses came to a well, and there he chose courage over fear. He defended the daughters of a priest, not as a prince, but as a servant. And Moses was given shelter, a family, and a place to belong. He married, started a family, and lived a life far from greatness. Years turned into decades. The cries of Egypt felt distant, and the call of God silent. But in the silence, God was shaping his heart, teaching him patience, humility, and trust. The years in Midian were not wasted, they were preparation. One ordinary day, while Moses tended the flock, he saw a fire that made no sense. A bush on fire, yet not consumed. Do not come any closer. Take off your sandals, for this is holy ground. I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Moses hid his face, afraid to look at God. I have seen the suffering of my people. I have heard their cries. I am sending you to Pharaoh, to bring my people out of Egypt. Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh?" Moses was scared. But Jesus said, "I will be with you. I am who I am." The shepherd was called to confront a king, and the journey of deliverance had begun. Two brothers, living into different worlds. God spoke to Aaron, calling him into the wilderness, and at the mountain of God. The brothers met, not in a palace, but in the wilderness. Moses told Aaron everything the Lord had spoken, and together they returned to Egypt. Aaron spoke to the elders of Israel, and the people believed. God confirmed his word with signs and wonders. Only then did they enter the palace, not as brothers reunited, but as messengers of God. Aaron and Moses speaks boldly in front of the Pharaoh. Pharaoh heard the command, but he refused to listen. Again they spoke God's words, "Let my people go." But Pharaoh's heart grew harder. Pharaoh demanded proof, and God allowed the battle to begin. Plague 1, water to blood. The river that gave Egypt life became a sign of judgment. Plague 2, frogs. There was no escaping what God had sent. Plague 3, gnats. Plague 4, flies. For the first time, God made a distinction between Egypt and his people. Plague 5, livestock die. Still, Pharaoh hardened his heart. Pride began to crack, but it did not break. Plague 7, hail and fire. Never had Egypt seen such a storm. Plague 8, locusts. A dark swarm of locusts devours what little remains. The sky turns black, nothing was left untouched. Darkness fell, thick and heavy. The final warning. God gave one final warning. A judgment unlike any before. God spoke to his people, telling them how to be saved. Each family was to take a lamb without blemish. When the blood was seen, judgment would pass over. They ate in haste, ready to leave at a moment's notice. At midnight, judgment fell upon Egypt. The final plague, the death of the firstborn. Pharaoh sits alone in darkness. He bows his head in grief. Across Egypt, silhouettes mourn. In Goshen, Hebrew homes remain calm and safe. But where the blood was seen, death did not enter. Pharaoh finally gave the command he had long refused. "Go, leave my people, and bless me also." That very night, Israel began their journey to freedom. After centuries of chains, God's people were free. God led his people out, not by the shortest road, but by the path of faith. By day, a cloud, by night, a fire. God himself went before them, but Pharaoh's heart turned once more. He gathered his army and pursued the people he had freed. The sea stood before them. The army stood behind them. Fear returned, faith wavered. Do not be afraid, stand firm, and you will see the salvation of the Lord. By the power of God, the sea opened a way where there was none. They walked through the sea on dry ground. Pride chased what God had already freed. The waters returned, and the enemy was defeated. That day, the Lord saved Israel. They sang to the Lord, for he had triumphed gloriously. Freedom had begun, but the journey was only starting. 3 days into the wilderness. Cracked ground, empty water skins, children grow weary. The water was bitter, and the people complained. But God turned bitterness into blessing. Night falls. Families sit quietly around small fires. Food is gone. Hunger followed thirst. Bread fell from heaven, just enough for each day. God provided again. God brought water from solid stone. Battle with Amalek. Joshua leads fighters below. On a hill, Moses raises his staff. Aaron and Hur support his arms. As long as Moses' hands were raised, Israel prevailed. Victory came, not by strength, but by obedience. Through thirst and hunger, battle and fear, God remained faithful. In the 3rd month after leaving Egypt, Israel came to Mount Sinai. Mount Sinai burned with fire, for the Lord had descended upon it. Then God spoke, with a voice like thunder. The 10 Commandments, he gave them his law, not to enslave them, but to guide them. They feared the presence of God, and asked Moses to speak for them. Moses ascends the mountain, so Moses drew near to the thick darkness, where God was. For 40 days and 40 nights, Moses remained with God. God made a covenant with Israel. They would be his people, and he would be their God. They were no longer slaves. They were a nation set apart. Moses was gone 40 days, and the people grew afraid. They said, "We do not know what has happened to him." So they went to Aaron and said, "Make us gods to lead us." Aaron hesitated, caught between fear of the people and fear of God, and from the fire, they shaped a god they could see. Forgetting the God who had saved them, people dance and celebrate around the calf. They bowed to gold, while glory burned on the mountain. The Lord saw what his people had done, and Moses saw the sin with his own eyes. The covenant was broken before it was even lived, but Moses pleaded for the people. The Lord revealed his heart, merciful and gracious, slow to anger. The covenant was restored, not because Israel was faithful, but because God was. Though they failed, God did not leave. After forgiveness came obedience. Everyone whose heart was willing brought an offering to the Lord. God filled them with wisdom to build his dwelling place. They built the tabernacle exactly as the Lord commanded. A place was prepared for the presence of God, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. God chose to dwell among his people. When the cloud moved, they moved. When it stayed, they stayed. They were no longer wandering alone. God was with them. At last, the journey continued toward the land God had promised. But faith was tested, and complaints returned. Still, the Lord remained patient. So Moses sent 12 spies to explore the promised land. The land was good, just as God had said. But they saw towering houses and giants, but fear spoke louder than faith. Joshua and Caleb stand alone and said, "If the Lord is with us, we will overcome." Joshua and Caleb reported what they had seen, strong cities and giants in the land. The people became afraid. Rebellion of the people, but the people refused to trust. God's judgment, that generation would not enter the land. God declared, for 40 years, they would wander the wilderness. The promise remained, but faith was required to receive it. The generation that left Egypt would not enter the promised land. Consequences of unbelief, they would fall in the wilderness, not by enemy hands, but by unbelief. Only Joshua and Caleb remained, because they trusted the Lord fully. Joshua and Caleb looked toward the distant hills of Canaan. The promise was not canceled, only delayed. Years passed in the wilderness. The old generation faded away, just as God had spoken. Moses reminded them of all the Lord had done, the victories, and the warnings. Israelite warriors defeat enemy kings. Enemies flee. Joshua stands at the front, calm and confident. And this time, they trusted God, and they overcame. Among them stood Joshua, a man of faith, chosen to lead. The promise had not failed, the people were ready, and the journey was not over. Moses gathered the people one final time. He reminded them of the journey, from slavery to freedom to the edge of promise. He set before them a choice, life or death, blessing or curse. Love the Lord your God, he said, with all your heart, all your soul, and all your strength. Then Moses appointed Joshua to lead where he could not go. And Moses saw the land, the promise fulfilled before his eyes, and his heart was at peace. Moses died at 120 years old, strong to the very end. And God himself buried Moses, and no one knows the place to this day. A leader had fallen, but God's promise moved forward. He delivered Israel from slavery, he gave them the law, he spoke with God. And his life pointed forward to a greater deliverer yet to come. Moses was faithful in God's house, but God's story was far from finished. This was the end of Moses' life, but not the end of his legacy. If you love God, type Amen. Please like, share and subscribe.